Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast. Good to see you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I was doing a little intro for you, and I basically was running down your list of accolades, and I was basically like, what hasn't Ashleigh done?
Eaten a vegetable in the last day or two? That's
Yes.
one thing. No, there's a lot I haven't done, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, no, I really wanted to say, Ashleigh, thank you for taking the time out today. It really means a lot. As part of my journey, you were really an influence in that, and as folks will come to find out, we share a little similar background in where you spent some time, and your mother's from, I believe, from Bermuda. Is that correct?
Yes. My mom's from Bermuda. She moved to Canada to go to school, and then for some reason decided to stay up north. And now, funny enough, she's a super Canadian now. It took her a while, but yeah. And so I spent some time in Bermuda. Well, I was always there growing up because a lot of my family is still there, and one of my best friends lives there. Shout out Cara. She's probably not on this call right now, but she's coming to visit me here in Canada in February. So. Brave Bermudian. But I did spend some time. I lived there after university and worked and very much enjoyed it. And at least once a year regret having left. I'm trying to get back there to see you guys because since the pandemic, every single one of my cousins, including myself, has had a child. And so I want us all to come back together and spend some time together. So I'm going to try to do that before too long.
Awesome. It's incredible how small this world is, because when I was so sick and I was searching through podcasts and I came across Muscle Maven Radio, and I was listening to you and your journey and how you added more animal protein into your diet and advocate for that way of eating, it really helped me. And then I heard, wait a minute, she was in Bermuda. Then I started to think, I think we know some similar people. And then my dad's Canadian. I went to university in Canada. Now you're living in Canada. It's a small world.
Well, Bermuda is one of those places, people joke about, you meet someone and you say oh, I'm from this place. And you say, oh, do you know Steve? And people joke about how that's so silly. But when you do that in Bermuda, the chances are, yes, you do know the same Steve. So.
Yep. So Ashleigh, what I'd like to do today, because I'm really conscious of your time and want to make sure folks learn everything they can about you, because there's so much to know, especially with your two books, is if you could give us a little bit of history on yourself. I know you were an editor. You got into muscle and fitness and through American Gladiator, things like that, watching it. And then I'd like to talk about this space, and specifically for women, which you're so great at, and just talk about some of the challenges that you faced and that women may face in this, especially the fitness and diet area, and just talk to that a little bit. So if you could give us a little background on how you got to where you are and became the Muscle Maven, that would be great.
Cool. I will try to keep it as brief as possible, because I if people want to hear the long drawn out story of how I came to be here, you can listen to my podcast and stuff too. But I became the Muscle Maven because I called myself that, first of all. So we'll just say that's just an Instagram account name that took off. So I'm one of those nerds that appointed themselves a nickname. But anyway, my background is marketing and communications, and I've always just sort of loved to read and talk and learn and interact with people about obviously shared interests. And, when I left university, I was doing very corporate work, and on the side, of course, I was learning about building muscle and strength and nutrition and all of those things, because it was something, I guess, looking back, I was always into. As you said, I had older brothers, and so I watched a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and a lot of American Gladiator. I didn't maybe have the typical, I don't know, sort of Disney princess upbringing, because no one was watching that. So I was always really interested in strength and what the human body was capable of. And as I was going through this learning process on my own time and getting into, whether it was CrossFit or powerlifting or any of the various sports that I've kind of dabbled in, I was also trying to figure out how to meld what I was good at, which is researching and writing and communicating and gathering information from really smart people and disseminating it in a way that us normal people could understand. And so I kind of over time figured out how to switch my career from a very corporate thing to doing this work that I love, and that was really validating and helpful for me, and hoping that it would help other people. And of course, just being, obviously a woman in this world, in the fitness industry, you start to pick up on the things that maybe are lacking, or that maybe are kind of created in a way to actually not help us in the way that we think the fitness and wellness industry should. And, I just realized that a lot of health and wellness podcasts and a lot of nutrition information and a lot of strength programs and all of these things were developed by men for men. And that's obviously an important category, but half of the world is not that. And we want to know how our bodies and our mindset and our culture and our world fits into how to be fit and strong. And I just noticed there was just a lot of diet culture, be smaller, eat plants, do this to be toned and light and lean, and just very one way to look at fitness and wellness for women. And it didn't fit into what I've always done and had success with. It didn't fit into the way I wanted to live. And I knew a lot of people were struggling with that way of eating and working out and living. So all that to say, it's kind of accumulated in all the things I'm doing now, which is creating these strength programs for women specifically, these really high protein cookbooks, which of course are for everyone. But, when I'm creating it, I'm sort of thinking about the woman who's been told that you have to eat light and you have to eat plant-based to be healthy, and what that was doing to them physiologically. And so everything I do is sort of with women in mind, but I do think that probably everything I've created works for everybody. So yeah, that's, I guess, not a brief elevator pitch, but there you go.
No, that was perfect. Thank you, Ashleigh. Yeah, specifically in regards, let's talk a little bit more about It Takes Guts. I know that, when doing my notes and research before we chatted, there was some podcast I listened to where you said you were a small voice in a sea of plant-based geared towards women. Certainly when I was vegan and my health fell off a cliff, big surprise, as I later found out, I noticed there was a ton of, obviously, women in the space, not very many men. It was a rarity, although there seems to be a lot more these days, especially with the agendas that are out there now and how prevalent it has become. And how I came across you as well is because I thought, which was probably a good thing, I learned that when I was adding food back in after being a vegan, I wanted to add the most nutritious and went towards, organ meats. What caused you to say, okay, I'm going to do a book on organ meat specifically? I know the answer to this, but there's probably folks here that are thinking, why would you do an organ meat cookbook first?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first of all, you're probably atypical because there's not too many people who go from vegan to organ meats. There's usually a slower path through, but I commend you for diving right in. I mean, really for me, it doesn't seem like that crazy of a stretch until I hear other people's reactions to what I did, and they're like, what are you thinking? But, I didn't grow up eating organ meats. I grew up eating very typical standard American diet, some healthy stuff, a lot of not healthy stuff, not really worrying about much at all. Child of the 80s, it's like, yeah, you'll figure it out later. But anyway, but looking back, I was always drawn to animal protein. I was always drawn to the dark meat and the fatty bits, and so I always wanted to eat the stuff that you're sitting around the table at Thanksgiving and everyone's eating their dry white turkey breast. No offense to people listening who might like that, but people who were eating sort of the very typical stuff that doesn't look much like it came from an animal. It's not on the bone, and I wouldn't eat skin on. Oh my God. And I was eating the gristly leftover fatty bits that no one ate. So it makes sense to me that I was drawn towards that direction anyway. But in my career, I was learning about paleo. I hosted Paleo Magazine Radio. I was writing for that magazine when it was running, and I was, interviewing all of these big names in ancestral health and the Rob Wolfs and the Mark Sissons of the world, and just learning about the very common sense approach of eating, minimally processed food that is recognizable, that, came from the ground or was a living thing, and that being just, again, a very common sense approach. Trendy names. People talk to me like, oh, you eat like a caveman, that doesn't make sense. And it's like, no, if you really just strip it down and strip down all of the nonsense, it's like eating food that our bodies recognize and that treat us well, you know? And as I was going through this journey, I'm kind of taking the next steps of like, okay, if I want to be as sustainable as possible, if I want to be as ethical and respectful of all the animals that I'm eating, if I want to get as much nutrition as I possibly can from the food that I'm eating, what's the next step? And that's eating nose to tail. And so I just started kind of experimenting, like little things here and there, some chicken hearts or a little bit of liver or whatever. And I was sharing it on social media as I was experimenting. And I just got a lot of feedback, like a lot of people who were grossed out, a lot of people who were interested, a lot of people who were shocked. And so I'm thinking in my head, like, there's an audience for this. People who are interested, people who do eat animal products, which is most people who are in the ancestral, primal, paleo, carnivore world. They need education on this because there isn't really much out there. I mean, there's a handful of organ meat cookbooks, and a lot of them are very like, you know, from French or Italian classically trained chefs who are just like, oh, you want to make a meal out of a rabbit brain? Well, here you go. And it's like, I was like, there's got to be something before that, right? For like the intro people, like, what are these organ meats? Like, the book is very educational. I mean, it's half recipes, half like teaching you about the cultural history of eating nose to tail and the nutrition and how to source them and how to prep them and break them down, because people don't know, like, where do you even start? It's very intimidating. It was intimidating for me. So I was going through the process and learning it as I wrote the book. And so it really is one of those things where, like, if I can do it, because I started from scratch just like anybody else. I didn't have any particular skills in the kitchen or like proclivity towards like this stuff. I just was interested and open-minded, and I like the taste of most of them. So this isn't like a chore for me. But it was a learning process, and it was really cool to see how many people, because I really thought like 4 people were going to buy this book. I really thought like I was going to, you know, guilt a couple of my friends into buying this book. And I really found new audiences that I didn't even know existed. And it's been really cool sharing that with people and helping people just be less freaked out about trying to eat these really, really nutrient dense foods that we ignore a lot of the time.
Yeah, no, ironically, Ashleigh, the person that said to me when I was making that switch initially and adding animal foods back in and say, why don't you have some liver and organ meats, was my wife's mother, who's from Venezuela. So it was a female who said to me, get those organ meats in you. And I got to tell you, having that liver for the first time was a game changer for me. I started with fish because it was the most known to me, being from Bermuda, and I was a pescatarian for many years. But when I added the liver back in, it was almost like the lights went back on in my brain. It was unbelievable. It's so nutrient dense.
Yep.
Ashleigh, you have some great first tips that I've heard you tell people about how, if they're getting into organ meats for the first time, that they can sort of utilize. There's like 3 or 4 that you have. Could you just let folks know what they are?
Yeah. So super easy ways to kind of dip your toes into this world. The very first one being, try organ meats that are on a menu at a restaurant, because you're immediately going to have them prepared well. You don't have to worry about your like beginner trial and error. You'll see how they're really meant to be prepared and how they're meant to taste. And if you actually kind of pay attention to menus, you will see that there are actually organ meats in a lot of places. So, you know, Mexican restaurants, you'll have like tongue tacos, and there will be like things like pho, which people kind of think of like, oh, this is like a Asian noodle dish. It's like there's often heart and liver and intestines and all kinds of interesting things in those soups if you're paying attention to it. Even French restaurants have like sweetbreads, and, you know, bone marrow is very popular. So go somewhere and like look and find the kind of not typical meat dishes at a restaurant and try those. It's like such little risk, right? If you don't like it, okay, you tried a dish and it's fine. But you didn't have to go out and source it and all that stuff. So restaurant's the first one. And then I would say, if you're going to be brave and go buy some organ meats and try to make them at home, start small. Start with small animals, because they're usually milder tasting. So like chicken hearts, chicken livers, turkey livers, things like that are going to be easier for you to kind of get your palate around if you go like straight to like a buffalo liver or something, which is going to be bigger and definitely stronger tasting. And then I'd also say, you know, you hear a lot in this world about organ meats and nose to tail that like liver is king. Liver is the most nutrient dense. Liver king. We don't have to go there if you don't want to. But anyway, liver is, and it is true. If you're gonna like the most bang for your buck, like liver is it. But if you're freaked out about the taste, if you're freaked out about the texture, you want something that's a little more familiar, go with heart first, because heart is a muscle. So heart is muscle meat the same way a piece of steak or a chicken breast is. So the taste of it and the flavor is going to be a lot closer to what you're already familiar with eating. And it's very versatile and very easy to make. And I have a ton of recipes, but even like chicken hearts, literally, like, you don't even need a recipe. You just throw them in a pan with some like salt and fat of your choice. And then you can slice them up, put them in a salad if you want, put them on top of rice if you want. They're very easy to make and very easy to eat. So those are some things right off the bat that I think can help.
Yeah, I've often heard, Ashley, as you well know, being in Bermuda can be
Yeah.
challenging to source fresh organ meats. It's really tough here. I mean, I can get the liver, I can sometimes get the chicken hearts, kidneys, which was one, unlike you, I still struggle with the kidneys
Mm-hmm.
as far as taste, but I did them at the beginning. I did them alongside the liver, and I think they were beneficial for me.
Mm-hmm.
Another one you talk a lot about is tongue, where people have an aversion to tongue, but once you try it in a taco, as you said, it's absolutely delicious.
So good.
Ashley, I remember you talking about also brain, and you said it's ironic that some of the organ meats that seem the least approachable are actually the most delicious and easy to get down. That's
Yeah.
correct, right?
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about, again, like liver, it kind of just looks like a piece of meat, and it looks pretty innocuous, and then you make it and it's quite a strong flavor and a different texture, and then you look at something like brain, you're like, that straight up looks like a brain, and to a lot of people that is terrifying to consider eating, but it is such a mild, like decadent, just easy to eat flavor. Things like sweetbreads, which are like a thymus gland, like that's kind of weird. They look a little bit weird. They're very, very mild. A lot of these organs, they just sort of absorb the flavor of whatever you're cooking with. The same with like tripe. So, like guts, literally, cleaned and prepped properly. They really just take on whatever flavor that you're cooking them with. So yeah, I mean, give some of these a shot and have somebody else make it. Maybe again, if you're intimidated, like the tongue thing, I remember buying, beef tongues and stuff, and it's a tongue and it's this big. Like, I get it. That's intimidating. It's like a 2.5 pound tongue. But I think that if we just sort of, again, if you're already a meat eater and you've accepted, on some level that like animals are dying for you to be nourished, and every time you go get a chicken breast, that is a piece of an animal. This is the exact same thing. I think we just, again, we're scared of what's unfamiliar, and it's really very arbitrary what we consider when it comes to eating animals, what we consider disgusting or extreme versus normal and average. Just because you see steaks and chicken breasts all day, every day at every grocery store you've ever been to doesn't make it any less an animal than eating their liver or their tongues, right? So I think it's just like getting a bit more comfortable with it. And if it is uncomfortable, sitting with that a little bit too, because again, if we're accepting that we're eating animals, like let's do this in a way that's as respectful and as sustainable and just causing as little impact as possible, right? I mean, there's a lot of conversation these days about what is worse for the environment and what kind of food we should be eating. But the reality is human beings, the vast majority of human beings are meant to eat animals, some form, in some amount. And how can we do that in a way that is the best for us and for the planet, right? That's
Yeah,
what we've been thinking about.
yeah, absolutely. Just last on this subject before we move on to your next cookbook, Carnivore-ish, is that you mentioned one time, especially, and let's go back to how, especially women, trying to get into the organ meat space, that you said that women's bodies and health change when they add organ meats back into their diet. I can only imagine that to be the case, especially, with what we know is out there up against and what women are up against in regards to body image and what they should and shouldn't be eating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like you said yourself, when you weren't eating a lot of animal products and you like ate a piece of liver, it's like someone gave you like a wonder drug. And it sounds corny, but it's true. And I've never been a vegan. I've been very fortunate that I haven't really ever fallen into the trap of like uber restrictive eating. I've always eaten meat and eaten food because I enjoy it and I love it. And when I started eating liver, was like what's going on here, because it's just, again, it's giving you these nutrients that you just aren't getting, and you aren't getting in that amount and that level of bioavailability. You just aren't getting that from other food. And so for women who are chronically restricting their calories, who aren't eating enough, who aren't eating red meat, we're cycling human beings who are getting rid of iron and magnesium and things like that at alarming rates, and it's not being replenished if we're not eating nutrient dense foods that have these vitamins and minerals. And we know animal protein is a complete protein with all the essential amino acids and vitamins and minerals that our bodies need to function. And there are little things like zinc and copper and iron and phosphorus that we don't think about until our bodies start shutting down. Maybe we go get a blood test and it's like, you don't have any of these because you're not eating anything. So I feel really, really strongly that women especially, because we do have unique nutritional needs, and also because we are taught to not eat enough, and it sucks. So I just want to lead by example, because I do coaching, I do health coaching too, and I still have women, like, people might be listening to this and think, like, if you're in this sort of wellness world, like, women know better. We know to eat real food and eat enough. And in this little microcosm, maybe that's true, but in the greater world, women are still very much being taught and internalizing plant-based, light, like small meals, be a little bit hungry, like this is how you do it, do a lot of cardio. Like, that is still very prevalent. There's a lot of work to be done. So I'm just trying to, like, put it out there as best I can, live a different way, and hope that some people pick up on it.
Thanks, Ashleigh. Before we move on, sorry, I apologize. One more, and it's specifically related to organs, is what are your thoughts on the supplementation in the desiccated organ space for those that don't or may not have access to them? Do you think that they are a good support for those that can, or are they kind of a waste of time? What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely not as good as eating the real thing. I think the biggest barrier is that they are costly, right? Like, it's an expensive supplement, especially when you consider that organ meats are actually cheap. So if you're willing to kind of get into it, it's so much more cost effective and more effective in general to just do the real thing. But I do recognize that there are some people who are just never going to get there. And I think that if you have the financial ability and the interest to supplement in general, like, people pay a ton of money for greens powders and things like that they're putting in their shake. I would recommend it if you have the ability and the interest. There's a lot of high quality companies out there doing this, and it's going to help. I use it, like, I have a company that I like, and I use them sort of as like an insurance policy, like everyday multivitamin. When I'm not making a lot of nutrient dense food, or I'm super stressed out, or I'm traveling, I'll take them. And I also lately have been, like, opening up. I've got, like, desiccated beef liver pills, and I'll open them up and sprinkle them in my kid's food because he's 17 months and he can't take a pill. So, and he does eat liver and stuff, but I'll just kind of, like, put it on his food, because it's just, I'm a huge fan in all facets of just sort of, like, boosting what you're already doing a little bit. Like, you don't have to, this is a bigger conversation about, like, you don't have to suddenly eat raw liver 5 days a week because you learned about liver and someone told you it's healthy. It doesn't have to be so extreme. You can have a couple ounces of organ meats once a month, and that's going to have an impact. Like, once a week is even better, but, like, you really don't have to do a ton. And so, like, a little bit of just, like, adding some desiccated organ meats to your food that you're already eating, or, like, just adding a little bit of liver to the burger you're already going to make, like, things like that. It doesn't have to be extreme. It doesn't have to change your life. You don't even have to really notice it. It's going to have an impact. So anyway, that's a roundabout way of saying, you don't need organ meat pills, but if you're going to take supplements and you're not going to eat the real thing, I do think it's beneficial. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I throw out there that, one early on in my journey, especially when I was sick, and as I've mentioned earlier in this talking with you, is that I don't have access like I would to a lot of the stuff, organ meat specifically here. So Richard and the Optimal Carnivore crew were very kind and reached out to me and sent me some free stuff when they didn't know me from Adam, and I was just online before all this online chat started. And I found them very beneficial for me, simply because I couldn't find, especially during COVID, when all this took place, when COVID first happened, is when I was my most sick and bedbound and really, really ill. So it was really great. So I really appreciate you letting us know that. Actually, one of the things that really drew me towards what you're putting out there in this social media space was that you are not dogmatic in your thinking. You're always learning. With your podcast, I think even with Muscle Maven Radio, it was an avenue for not only to interview a lot of folks, but to learn yourself about the health space. And I really appreciated that. And I'm going to segue this into talking about your other book, Carnivore-ish, where folks can approach carnivore and not feel that they have this narrow bandwidth of what to eat and what to do. And if you do this, you're going to get excommunicated from the community. But it just allows folks to go in there from a perspective like you can have some plants if you need them or want them, and this is how you can add more protein and add the benefits of animal foods back in by looking at it this way. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate it. I mean, anybody who feels pressured to eat a certain way because of the community they've entered into, like, get out of there and come hang out with me, because life is too short to put your health and your mental health at risk because you feel like you're, you know, cheating on an ideology. It's like so silly, but we do it. And I understand, because again, we want to feel part of a group and we feel connected, and that's very important. But I would urge people to try and find connection in another way, except for how strictly you eat a certain way. Because I mean, the reality is that is going to change throughout your life regardless. Even if you found the perfect way of eating, like, probably that's going to change throughout your life as your goals change. Maybe you have a kid, maybe you get sick or injured, maybe there's all kinds of, your preferences change. Like, there's so many things that can change the way you eat. And so I hate the idea that people, and I have so many like women coming to me for coaching who were keto for a long time, for example, to like, had a lot of weight to lose and they were keto and it was really effective, and then it stopped being effective. And then either they plateaued or gained weight, or they were just having other issues, and they were so scared to try something different because this way had worked. And again, I get it. I get the fear of like jumping into the unknown. But I feel like if we approached it more like an evolving journey that's learning about our bodies and how it works, and less about, I got to pick this team or that team and this didn't work, so I'm a failure and all this stuff, like, just, no, it's learning. It's learning. And every time you try something that doesn't work, you're learning about yourself, right? And that was what Carnivore-ish is. Like, I joke about this new book. It's like, the book is really just, here are some delicious meals that have animals and plants in them, but like, that's not a catchy title, and that's not gonna sell books. Here's just some healthy food, guys, like, whatever. It has to sort of be catchy, and Carnivore-ish applies because it is, all of the meals are animal protein focused, and sort of maybe just like asking people, especially women, to consider their plate a little differently. Instead of, here's a big salad and maybe I'll like sprinkle some hemp seeds on it for protein or something, and think about, actually, maybe try eating like a big old chicken thigh and then maybe some vegetables on the side. Try that. Yeah, just kind of reimagining what your plate can look like and how you can be healthy and achieve your health goals and even look good, even change your body composition, and do that without feeling restricted and hungry and sad about what you're eating, right? Because it really is possible. And I've been through this, I went through my 20s. I was a competitive bodybuilder. Like, I know what it's like to be super anal, and I know what it's like to think you have to live in restriction to look a certain way. And I really feel like, we've all been through journeys in the pandemic, but I really feel like the pandemic and all the things that, like, how my life changed, and then having a kid, like, a lot of that taught me how hard you don't have to work so hard. You can work intelligently and you can work differently. You don't have to work so hard. And it's just been very, very empowering for me. And that's kind of a message I want to get across with the new book too.
It's amazing. And as I say, it really sort of aligned with how I was feeling, actually, because as you probably know, the vegan world is filled with dogma. Unfortunately, it is a really crazy space. I think a lot of folks like myself got into it for the right reasons, thinking that we're doing the right thing for our health and for the planet based on all the stuff that is out there. But ultimately, you find that if there's any sort of mention of you even adding any animal products back on, even something as simple as honey that is in the carnivore space now very talked about dogmatically, right? My journey, when I got off, I went sort of keto first, and then as I found myself getting better, I eliminated all the plants and went 100% carnivore. But then a couple of months in, I had a few issues. And then as I dug deeper, I found out, because good old James went so gung-ho on the vegan diet, that he was eating all the highest oxalate foods. And coincidentally, I have Sally Norton on here next week with me.
Nice.
So I'm discussing her new book, and I had to add some plant foods back in, and I do that. I added some fruits back in right now, but they've worked right away. I got that advice from Sally, God bless her, online, saying, hey, slow down a little bit. You're going to be dumping all these oxalates that you ate. I mean, I was eating chard, turmeric, chia seeds,
All of it. Yeah.
3 days every day in a smoothie. Let her rip. I thought I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Ashley, you hit on something there too. You know, the secret that there is no secret, trial and error. A lot of folks think it's just going to happen. You know, you are a perfect example of someone who has put in the work. And let's talk about, you made a post in your stories this morning about women who get into this space of muscle building and this bulkiness,
Don't
and it's
unleash
still,
this on me.
I am, I
Don't get me
am.
started.
I am because it is so important. And what I do want to talk to you about, and we can talk to you a little bit about our dear friend, the Liver King, who finally came out and admitted he was on some other enhancement stuff. There is a guy online who goes around into the gyms now, and I want to get your opinion on this, and I'll shut up and let you speak in a second, is that he goes around and asks folks, are they natty or not? And have you seen that guy? And actually, that's the sad part is for me, that is all the women who are now admitting that they're taking gear and taking supplements and stuff. Did you encounter that in your bodybuilding world? And also, yeah, this whole I'm going to get bulky if I work out. Please, I'll let you take it.
I mean, how much time do we have?
I know.
And I
I'm
do
sorry.
want to say, just before we get into this really quickly, just because I want to be equal opportunity, like you were talking about in the vegan community, how dogmatic it can be. And I don't have a whole lot of like firsthand experience with that, but I can tell you the carnivore community is also that way. All the communities are that way. So we're not like just getting mad at vegan. And I think one of the things I'm most proud about with the work that I do, honestly, and just going to toot my own horn here, is that like I have people from all the communities coming to me. It's almost like once they get shunned from theirs, they like come hang out with me, because it's not cool. Like so many people in all these communities who, like you said, all of them are starting with the right idea. Like, I don't think anybody starts this journey to be like, I want to make people feel bad and hurt other people or something. Everyone's doing it because they think this is the right, healthiest way to be, and they want to teach people. But when we get so dogmatic and we communicate in a way that makes people feel stupid or bad about themselves for doing things a certain way, psychology plays out. That doesn't help people change their behavior by like condescending to them and making them feel bad, right? So it's just, I'm so happy when I have people come to me who are like, I am plant-based, or I used to be plant-based, or I'm trying this new thing and that new thing. I'm interested in what you're doing. Because to me, it shows that like they feel like they can talk to me and learn from me, and they're not going to be like shunned and made to feel bad. So anyway, I just had to get that out. But
No, that's absolutely, sorry to interrupt you, Ashley. It's really important, because I will share with you that I completely agree with you that as I got into the carnivore space, and I'm in it now, I'm primarily carnivore. However, I've always encouraged folks to do what works best for them. Experiment, like you talk about, with yourself. Find out what works, what doesn't. Your body will tell you pretty quickly. And unfortunately, through talking in a few of the podcasts I've done and interviews I've done with women in this space, they are the ones getting a lot of this dogma in the carnivore space. And this is what will lead into what you're about to talk about now too.
Yeah. So the bodybuilding world is interesting. I mean, I've written a lot about it. I've talked a lot about it, and I have generally positive feelings and memories and thoughts about my experience with competitive bodybuilding, but I feel like I had a very unique experience. You know, people are very quick to say that bodybuilding in general, competitive bodybuilding especially, is very dysfunctional and attracts people with eating disorders and body dysmorphia and really unhealthy attitudes towards fitness. And that is accurate in a lot of cases. You could make the argument that CrossFit does the same thing, as does endurance running, as does ballet, like you can name it. Like, again, it's the dogma, the obsession, the perfection, you know, that's where the issue comes in a lot of the time. But of course you could argue that like a sport that is based on objective judging of a person's body is a little problematic. So I think I did okay. I got out of it okay, because I did it relatively like later in life. I was pretty well established in my own sort of self-esteem and sense of self-worth. So I really wasn't doing it for like that purpose so much. It was really more just a continuation of my like experimenting on myself kind of, and like, can I do this? Can I stick to a strict diet? Can I get a six-pack? What'll that be like? Can I do that whole like prep and whatever? So I had like a really a positive experience with it. And I did well with it, because again, I had spent most of my life working out and like doing bicep curls, and you know, I'm not an overly shy person, so the idea of like getting up on stage and like being cute was not like a big deal to me. That's probably a big hurdle for a lot of people. So I really enjoyed it. With that said, I did see a ton of just unhealthy behavior, and it is kind of what stopped me from continuing it, because I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I did well. I was winning competitions. And then I got to kind of a stage where it was essentially, there's no way you're continuing unless you take some performance enhancing things, and you start really changing up your supplement regimen. So I was always very proudly natural and competing in natural competitions, which are not very heavily monitored. I mean, there's still tons of people taking stuff. I think one of the differences with like male bodybuilding and female bodybuilding is that it's very kind of out in the open and understood that many men, and it's not even competing men, are supplementing and taking hormones and, gear, right? With women, it's still a little bit more, I don't know, taboo and not really talked about, and they're sort of judged for it, but everyone's kind of doing it secretly. And like people also think that like, only big, huge, bulky bodybuilding women are taking things. And that's absolutely not true. A lot of very small, very normal looking bikini competitors, for example, are taking a ton of stuff. There's a ton of pressure. It's very, very normalized in the community. Like I just had people being like, well, why wouldn't you just, you've got this great like base. Why don't you just take some stuff? Why don't you just maybe get some breast implants? Why don't you just do that? And I didn't want to do any of that stuff. And I saw that, the reality is, again, we go back to women's hormonal cycles and the connection of our like cycle to our overall health and our reproductive health. I mean, this impacts men as well, but it can really, really impact women later on in the future. And I think we have so much of this, like, I want to do this now for this gratification to look a certain way and feel a certain way now. And we don't consider maybe what it can do later on down the line. So I just was never so tied into it that I was willing to compromise my health in any way. So, but I see it's getting more common. It's getting, and I think it's with the rise of sort of social media fitness communities. We just see so many unrealistic looking bodies, and we are pressured to do whatever it takes to get there. I mean, that natty guy, that it is kind of funny. I know it's sort of problematic, but it's kind of funny. But it's also like, it's asking people if they're taking drugs, but it's also asking women like what plastic surgery you've had, because you're just kind of assuming at this point that these people are getting like butt whatever, like adding to their butts, and they're adding all this stuff. And it's just like, it makes me sad for people who are growing up, who are a little bit younger and maybe a little bit more impressionable, or a little bit more willing to take these very invasive and potentially like long standing risks to just sort of look a certain way, and even to look a certain way for other people, because I don't know, people could fight me on this, but I think a lot of these like drastic physical changes that we're making, and we're saying it's all about empowerment and like looking good for ourselves, but I don't know if that's always the case. And I don't know how we can determine that. For example, like if we're willing to like do these very, very potentially problematic things to our bodies purely for ourselves. I don't know.
Yeah, you always, and one thing that I really admire about you is you said people have approached you in the gym and say, look, I want to work out, but I don't want to get bulky. And you say to them, well, look at me. Do you think I'm bulky? And they say, no. And you've been at this for literally years, and eating all the stuff, all the meat. And I agree. I'm thankfully putting weight back on now. With the vegan diet, I got down to 127 pounds. It looked like it was terrible, Ashleigh. I'm back up to around 170 now. Eating protein and adding muscle is so easy with this way of eating. Like it is. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about women and this faux pas against eating a lot of protein. You talk very well about that as well. I mean, women just need to eat more protein than they've been told over the years.
Yeah, I mean, someday I just wish somebody would come up to me in the gym and say, you are bulky. So I'd be like, finally, all this work is paid off. Yeah, I mean, so much of that is like, it's body composition, understanding semantics, and then it's also like, I've said before too, like if you are like a little, like if a woman somehow got a little too muscular or like a little bulky, like it's the worst thing in the world. Like we still are in this culture where it's like the worst thing in the world. Like the trends changed. So now like big lower bodies, big butts and big strong thighs are in. And it's like, on one hand, cool. On the other hand, it's still like, it's all about how you look. It's all about this one kind of non-functional thing. Like I've made this like this comparison before that, you know, men who go into the gym and only want to work like chest and buys, right? And they're just like bench pressing all day. And everyone thinks that's the silliest, most ridiculous thing in the world, right? Like, why would a guy do that? That's so ridiculous. You're just doing that to look good, and it's totally not functional, and it looks stupid, and you've got chicken legs or whatever. And then we tell women, like, go get the biggest butt you can. Don't ever do an upper body workout. And that's cool. That's sexy. That's hot. We should all commend them for it. It's like, it's because maybe somewhere in fitness culture, we still believe that men should be doing this for like strength and functional reasons, and women should be doing it purely for aesthetic reasons, right? So anyway, it's something to consider. But you know, other people speak about this protein for women thing much more articulately than I do. You know, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, and there's all kinds of people out there talking about the importance of protein. But ultimately, it's a great body composition tool as well, because it is, first of all, the most important macronutrient. Fat and carbs also absolutely have their place and are necessary in differing amounts for different people. But protein is the building block, like on which our bodies function, but also our muscle is able to grow and be supported. And it also, lots of research shows that, you know, you're not really at risk of like gaining fat or having health issues by sort of even moderately over consuming protein. It's very hard to overconsume because it's incredibly satiating and nutrient dense. But if you're going to eat a little too much of something, protein's kind of the one to do it, because it's not going to turn into fat the same way and you know, basically be a waste. We should be eating more protein. Women should be eating more protein. I mean, I like to say generally, like a good rule of thumb is sort of like 1 gram per pound of body weight, or more specifically, maybe lean body weight if you have a lot of fat to lose, or, you know, ideal body weight. So like for me, if I'm 130 pounds, I'm usually trying to get around 125. Maybe if I'm really trying to, like, I don't know, lean out, maybe it would be a little bit lower or a little bit higher, because then I'd be like maybe eating less carbs or something. But, you know, I still have women who have a really hard time eating more than like 40, 50 grams per day. And that's what you need to like survive, to like get through the day. And we don't want to survive. We want to grow muscle. And we still, one of my biggest challenges, I think, with my coaching clients is this like, this friction of, I want to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. So they want to build muscle, but they want to be in a calorie deficit. And it's tough to explain just how incredibly difficult and counterintuitive that is, to eat less than your body needs and somehow grow tissue that takes really a ton of effort to create. So I would just encourage, like, again, if women get anything from any nutrition advice I give, it's like, don't be afraid of protein, probably eat more of it. It's not going to harm you, and it will most likely really help you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. That's awesome. I wanted to talk to you quickly about also, especially again, congratulations on your birth. I know it's been a while now, but of your son, that was amazing. And for ladies that are in the space and are either looking to become pregnant or are pregnant themselves now, I know there is a lot of stigma and dogma in that about how much protein, again, meat you should eat and shouldn't eat. I know you've been very open and said you ate a ton of stuff during your pregnancy, and you also didn't have any aversions. Luckily, you didn't really get any sickness, but you know, some people may. What's your advice to these women that are looking in and saying, well, I want to add more protein, but I'm getting pregnant, but all this information out there says, whoa, don't do it, don't do it.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there. I mean, two sort of high level things I would say is, anybody who's listening who wants to be pregnant, is pregnant, wants to know about nutrition, follow Dr. Lily Nichols on Instagram. She wrote a book called Real Food for Pregnancy, which is like the book for women who, reproductive age women who want to learn more. Follow her. She has so much good free content, and the book is incredible. And she just has so much research backed, just real information about that will help you determine how you want to eat during pregnancy. So Dr. Lily Nichols, 100%. I also wrote a little thing. I've got an ebook on my website that is a little bit more just sort of like common sense from me sort of information. It is researched as well, and I have some recipes in there for you, but it's kind of answering some of these main questions that people have, like, am I allowed to eat this? What happens if I eat that? Someone told me I should be doing this and I'm scared. I have aversions. How do I get over it? Like answering some of those questions. So you can check out my little ebook as well. It might help you. But generally, I think, I mean, it's tough with pregnancy because some of it really is genetic. Like you can do all the right things and still have crazy morning sickness. Like you got to work around it. I mean, that was one thing that was so incredible for me about pregnancy is like every day there's just like a new thing to contend with. There's like, oh, well, this is happening to my body now. Let's see what I should do about that. You know, I didn't really have a lot of aversions, so that did help. But I mean, I still like, it was still interesting. Like I still ate differently for sure. I mean, I upped my carbs significantly in pregnancy and postpartum when I was breastfeeding. Prior to that, I was really like quite low carb paleo, I guess you could say. And I upped the carbs big time done during pregnancy because your body is working incredibly hard. And even when it doesn't look like it, that first trimester, you're doing so much work and there's nothing really to show for it yet. And so a lot of women are feeling tired and sick and also sort of discouraged because, you know, they feel like, why do I feel so crappy for no reason? There's a very good reason. But I would say, you know, some of my advice was people in our medical world now, I feel like doctors are saying like, you know, prep yourself for a couple years before you want to get pregnant. Start taking a prenatal vitamin, like do some stuff that will be healthy for you. Like live your life that way, you know, like I didn't prep at all for pregnancy because my way of living was prepping me for healthy pregnancy. I was eating nutrient-dense foods, I was eating meat and organ meat. I was exercising safely, so I was, you know, not overdoing it. I had a healthy cycle, and if something was going on there, I would talk to a you know, medical professional, try to figure that stuff out. So I encourage women to like respect that reproductive health, whether you want to have a kid or not, because that is your like biggest signal as to whether there is something going right or wrong in your body. And I don't like the sort of insinuation we have in our culture that like when you want to have a baby is when you should be taking care of yourself. You know, we should be taking care of ourselves regardless and respecting our body, whether we're going to have a kid or not. And if you do that, then your body will be ready and prepared if that happens, right? So as far as like specific questions about eating animals and or not, or sushi or whatever, I mean, again, there's tons of answers and with Dr. Lily Nichols and the ebook that I did, but I think it is the one time in your life, in my experience, that your body will more clearly than ever tell you what it wants. And you should really spend that time trying to listen and hear it and honor it, because it will very clearly tell you what it needs.
Yep. Again, just hearkening back and speaking from a man's perspective, when I went vegan, my testosterone, libido, everything left. We know that fats and protein and everything are the building blocks for hormones. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, since adding back and eating way more protein and good old animal fats, everything's back to normal. But the same thing happens with women. My wife, who was also plant-based and vegan with me, has noticed similar benefits in adding a lot of protein back and meats and fats back in her diet now. It's just... yeah, and when you start delving into the history and John Harvey Kellogg and the Seventh-day Adventist Church and why we were told to eat a lot of these things, it just, yeah, it's crazy. It's just crazy. I made a post on all that. When you go into the matrix, and especially the food matrix, it is eye-opening. Ashleigh, as we start to wind down, I have one more topic that I want, and it's related to this, and then we'll do some fun questions before I let you go. With the women in this space, and your podcast now is Muscle Science for Women, correct?
Yes.
For women that are looking for a podcast and that follow you, what type of things? I mean, I know the answer to this. I've listened to a bunch, but what type of things with your co-host, right? It's Rachel, that you guys talk about, and so folks can get to know you there? How did you start that? Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, I decided to basically kind of rebrand the podcast because for many years, and I've been podcasting for like 7 years, and I was just like getting tired of it. Like, it's a lot of work, as you know, to interview people and research and prepare and do all this stuff. It's a lot of work, and I was just feeling a little bit burnt out. And I was also feeling like I've hit this point in my career where like I'm a authority on a couple things. Like, I know some things, that I want to position myself as someone who can help people instead of just the conduit between the smart people and the people who need to hear it. Like, I want to be one of those smart people who's helping people now. So I really wanted to kind of just switch the podcast to more of a casual conversational, like me and Rachel are like your friends in this world who want to share some things with you and help you and answer your questions and be accessible, and a little bit less focused on interviewing folks. We do still do interviews, but I just kind of felt like I've kind of interviewed everybody, and like it was becoming a bit of an echo chamber. So I just wanted to have more fun with it. And so now it's mostly Rachel and I. We're answering questions from our audience about all things health and wellness and fitness. We're talking about current events. We're talking about the big questions of body composition changes and hormonal health and reproductive health and building muscle and fitness culture and what we can do to work on that and improve it. And of course, this podcast is, again, for everyone, the same way that I grew up listening to all dudes all the time on fitness podcasts and learning from it and getting a lot from it, but realizing there were limitations. I'm super pumped that there are guys who are still listening to the podcast and learning from it, because at the end of the day, if you're an educator, if you're a coach, if you're somebody who has a wife or a sister or a friend who wants to get stronger and healthier, like, it benefits all of us for us all to know more about women's health, because it's just something that isn't talked about enough, except for in very small, like, hyper specific circles. And it's not a specialty thing. Half of the world is women, and we need to know more about them. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun with it, and I think the feedback has been good. So I think it's doing well.
Well, congratulations to you, Ashleigh. You are officially an authority on stuff now. That's why I reached out to you, not only because of the Bermuda connection, but I'm looking in that conduit space now, because I'm so happy that I'm back to health, and I want to share any experiences or anything, because podcasts saved me, literally. If I hadn't found the information I did on your podcasts, on other folks' Carnivore Cast, and I don't know, Ashleigh, honestly, I don't know if I'd be here. If I was here, I would not be in a really good state. I was really, really sick. So I want to say thank you. And yeah, thank you for coming on again today.
That's amazing. Thank you. And thank you for doing this. I mean, I feel like there's not a lot of this, like, uber accessible, like, on Instagram that's so well thought of. Like, you've been doing a really good job with this stuff. So I'm just like, I'm honored to be here, honestly.
Thank you. Yeah, like you, I learned from you in that respect, because when you were talking about your It Takes Guts cookbook and finding that niche, you get in where you fit in these space these days. And I was like, I saw the live, and I wanted to get people on live, not only for people get a chance to know me in a live environment, but also to see my guests in a live environment, ask their questions, things like that. Ashleigh, I got some fun questions for you. I know you know a couple of them already. And some folks sent some questions, and we'll get to those as well. One of the things that really made me smile one day is you posted a picture of yourself doing push-ups in a museum. I know why, but can you tell folks? I think we need to start the challenge of taking a photo of yourself doing push-ups in random spots. What occurred there?
I love that. I mean, I think the answer of why is just because you can't take me anywhere. But, it's like, I don't know, on a grander scale, it's like when you're into being strong, like, you kind of want to do it all the time. Like, I can't pass, like, a tree branch without doing some pull-ups, because, like, I want to, and it feels good. But yeah, I was at a friend's wedding, and the pictures were being taken in this beautiful museum, and my girlfriend and I are in these, like, beautiful gowns, and we're sitting around, and we're, like, waiting to get our picture taken, and we were just screwing around. But people liked it. But the funny thing is, I posted this video of me doing push-ups in this, like, sparkly ball gown, and I did inevitably get some people responding that were like, that's stupid. Like, why would you do that? And I'm like, because I want to. Like, what's the problem? Like, is it, people don't bat an eyelash if I would put, like, sexy pictures of myself in a dress online, but I'm, like, showing my biceps and doing push-ups, and you don't like it, So it was interesting. But yeah, I want more women to be proud of the things they can do, instead of in addition to what they look like. There's nothing wrong with being cute. Everybody wants to be cute. That's great. But I think one of my missions is getting women a little bit more, like, intrinsically empowered and feeling capable and feeling good about themselves for reasons other than just what they look like.
Yeah, I think you definitely need to start the Muscle Maven photo challenge. If you're dressed, if glammed up push-up challenge somewhere, and you send and tag you in it, it'll be awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
Actually, the other one, of course, which you know about is and I fell victim to this in the vegan space, was the good old phrase plant-based collagen. I know. Where do we start on that?
Yeah, I mean, really, like we can joke and roll our eyes all day long, but I mean, there's a lot of, we know that sort of the food marketing industry is just full of like blatant misguided marketing misinformation, like fully on purpose, you know. Like my other favorite one was the that stuff, it's called
Oh,
just egg or just eggs, and it literally contains zero eggs.
yeah.
It's like, it seems like it's something from like a Black Mirror episode or something, but like this is real life. And you know, again, I feel like we've got this echo chamber on Instagram. You've seen that, the graph that's going around that's like, you know, the USDA or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, people saying that like cereal, like marshmallow cereal, is healthier than steak, and that's like the new American food guidelines and stuff. And like, so I'm thinking like nobody actually looks at that and believes it, you know, like we certainly don't. And like even the average person, consumer, who's not in the health and fitness industry, like people don't actually believe that. But we don't pay that much attention anymore. Like as consumers, we go into the grocery store and we buy what has a splashy green label that says plant-based, gluten-free, healthy, or whatever, because we assume that people are trying to tell us the truth and trying to help us, when that's not really the case. They're trying to make money. And so, you know, we don't have to dive too deep down like the, you know, conspiracy theory rabbit hole, because it's right there in the open. I mean, it's capitalist culture where people want to make money, and it's not always about our best interest in our health. And so we have to take the time to read labels and read ingredients and understand for ourselves what works. And if you get overwhelmed, if you get confused, you can just kind of go back to like basic principles of like, if it doesn't have an ingredient list, you're probably good, right? So like fruits and vegetables and nuts and meat and things like that, those are probably like safe staples. And then everything else, you kind of really need to like, you need to do your own work and your own research, because they're not going to help you. Like they're trying to trick you. So it sucks. But yeah, there's no such thing as plant-based collagen.
Thank you. Hallelujah. Amen.
Exist.
I'm so actually, if I told you how much of those just eggs and the vegan burgers I consumed, you'd shudder.
What does it taste like? What does just egg featuring no egg taste like?
Like cardboard. It has the consistency and scrambles like an egg, which you when
Right.
you're doing it, you're like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. But now after eating so many regular eggs again, you're like, oh my God, how did I do it? This and the same with the burgers. They taste terrible, really, to me.
I think I did try like a Beyond Meat burger once, because I had to do it. But I mean, I think the other thing to look at with like the proliferation of these like fake pseudo meat products. First of all, it's people trying to make money and whatever, but it's also like it shows you how important on a cellular level these products are for humanity, that they are going to such lengths to recreate them, because there's a part of all of our brains, plant-based, vegan, whatever, that's like, I need this food. Like I know eggs are healthy, I know meat is healthy, I know they taste good, but I feel bad eating it. So like help me recreate it, you know. Like the fact that those are so popular, that's saying something. So that's something to consider too.
That's a really, really good way of putting it. And yeah, a really good way. A few more questions, Ashley. There's a question that came in, and there's some popping in. DKD Free asked, when supplementing with the desiccated organs, is it okay to take just 2 days per week? And she also asked, what carbs do you still eat, Ashley?
Yeah, so I mean, again, with the supplements and with organ meats in general, it's like there is probably like an upper tier of like, you don't want to eat a ton. Like people talk about things like vitamin A toxicity and stuff, which is actually very hard to get through whole food sources. Like you don't have to be, the average person doesn't have to be worried about eating too much liver, for example, because again, like it just doesn't taste good enough that you're going to want to eat 12 ounces of it a day. And certainly the same goes for the pills. So you probably aren't going to overdo it. If you're doing less than what is recommended, like it's just kind of like a slower burn. Like you're still going to benefit. It's not going to be like you wake up tomorrow and you feel like Superman, because the dose is very small. But I think a lot of people do recommend with things like the desiccated organs to actually start less and kind of like work your way up, because some people can have reactions. I mean, I think it's quite rare, but even with things like collagen, if you're a plant-based person and you suddenly dive into like raw liver, like, yeah, your body might be like, what the heck, you know? So I think it's totally fine to work up slowly. And like, I'm not taking them every day. I'm not eating organ meats every day. I think every little bit counts. As far as carbs, I eat the carbs that I know I tolerate and enjoy. So I eat like a lot of different sweet potatoes, like purple sweet potato, regular sweet potato, and I'll eat rice. I tolerate rice really well. I'll eat sourdough bread. I mean, to be honest with you guys, like I can eat gluten. Like it doesn't really impact me much. I mean, if I ate like a lot of it, I'd probably feel kind of bloated and not great, but like I don't have a ton of actual food sensitivities. So I really just kind of eat the foods that like aren't so hyper palatable that I'm going to be feeling like I need to eat a ton of it all the time. But I'm not so like, you can never eat grains, or you can never eat whatever. Like I eat oats. I know like gluten-free oats. I know like that's kind of demonized a lot in some health circles, but I know that I like tolerate and digest it really well. So I'll eat that. I eat some fruit. I don't eat a ton of fruit. Berries and citrus and stuff I really like. And I'll eat some green veggies. I don't eat a ton because I just honestly, I don't feel like it adds much to my life, and I don't love the taste. But like, you know, I have some good recipes. Like I'm not against vegetables by any means. I don't go out of my way to fill my plate because I know that that real estate is better served with more nutrient dense foods.
Yes, awesome. One question here, and I'll preface this by saying both Ashleigh and I are not physicians, but we'll try our best. I'll ask Ashleigh her thoughts. Is someone named 68IOU1 Cummins asked, is it normal for blood sugar levels to vary when you start eating carnivore or more meat?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because human beings are so bio-individual, right? Like you're going to get so many different kinds of reactions, and like everything from blood sugar kind of ups and downs to some people having like major digestive issues, right? When they start eating meat, like one of the biggest, most common things I hear when people go carnivore is like, you know, you're getting like the poops, like it's not good. I never experienced that. And maybe it's because I've always been high protein, so my body was just primed for it. But I think anytime you switch your diet, whether it's in a better direction, a worse direction, just a different direction, your body is going to need some time to adjust. So I would, again, not physicians, you should be working with somebody that you trust and be intelligent about this, but you do kind of need to give any change some time for your body to adjust. So things that are happening the first couple of days may very well sort themselves out over the coming weeks or months, but yeah, you have to do what's right for you. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I echo what Ashleigh said. You know, there's going to be changes. I was the one that suffered with the the runs when I transitioned over, but that has all resolved. It's quite common in regards to blood sugar. Sally Norton often talks about it depends on our tale of where we came from dietarily too. You know, if you're coming from a diabetic background or hypoglycemia, I think this particular person has messaged me before on hypoglycemia. You just have to be cognizant of that. There will be some variation. I think as you phase sugar out, we know how addictive it can be, but also how folks have to be very careful from an insulin perspective. And, you know, if you're not as insulin resistant as some folks are, just watch and monitor, consult with your physician, especially on blood sugar levels. That's something really important to do. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Last couple of fun questions from me, Ashleigh, and then I'll let you tell folks where to find you. With everything that you've eaten, including the organ meats, what is your favorite meal these days?
Oh my God, favorite meal? Jeez. I mean, that's tough. One thing that is coming up for me that just because I know people probably want to hear something crazy and not like normal,
No,
like roast
no,
chicken and potatoes. I mean,
no.
whatever. It's impossible for me to pick a favorite meal. There's so many good things, but I will say that one of my favorite foods, period, one of the most delicious and nutritious foods that people can't believe is cod liver. Like straight out of the tin. Can you get that in Bermuda? Can you get cod liver?
We can. I was not expecting that. That's pretty
I mean,
cool.
listen, it's not necessarily my like, you know, last day on earth meal, but like it truly is one of the most delicious foods. And like it's so funny because we think of cod liver as this like disgusting thing you have to force yourself to eat for health, but like cod liver is one of the most decadent, delicious, and like when I eat it, I'm like, how does this just come from nature? Like, how does it just taste like this? Like, it's so good. And I think one of the things that I've with getting sort of older and wiser that I'm really appreciating about food is like how delicious and decadent nutritious food is, because we know that like an amazing brownie whatever is delicious and tasty because it's sugar and it's fat and it's all the things that like make your brain short circuit the pleasure centers. But like things like a really delicious fatty steak or something from like a healthy animal, or cod liver or things like that, they are so, or like a fatty piece of salmon, like it's so decadent. And it's just, that's just the way that food is meant to taste. And you're like, this is delicious because it's nourishing, not because it was made and created in a lab some way to make your brain think it's delicious. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, cod liver, you guys should all try it. Nice. Everybody thinks I'm nuts when I say this, but it's so good. But with that said, I don't know, like my like last meal on earth would probably be like some unholy creation of like lobster and chocolate and jeez, I don't know. I have to think about it more. There's too many delicious foods to choose.
This is a fact.
Yeah.
Actually, being an author yourself, who is your favorite author or favorite book that you have that you could recommend to folks, or that's just your favorite? What do you enjoy reading on your time that you get whenever you can find it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a fiction reader. Like I have a whole office full of educational books about health and wellness. So like go get like Arnold's bodybuilding Bible and go get like the Paleo Mom's like massive book about how to eat like there's so many good sort of educational books. But because I do so much research and work for my job, like when I read, I want to read like escapism fiction. So I think, I'll just say, because I have like too many books to recommend, but I would say like a lot of people, especially in our industry, in our world, we're so focused on like learning all the time. It's like, maybe just go like get some like beach read, go get some like thriller, mystery, sci-fi book and just like enjoy it and just go like escape for a minute. Cause I think we need more of that. There's Netflix that can do it for us, but like we're all so like hardwired to just be like learning. Everything has to be productive all the time. Like just go read like a piece of fiction and enjoy it. That's my advice.
Yep. Good one. Very good advice. Actually, last one from me. What's next for Ashleigh VanHouten, the Muscle Maven? What have you got coming up? What do you got plans for?
Yeah. So part of it is just like I have Muscle Science for Women, which is actually a 12-week strength training program for women that I just want more people to know about. So I'm really trying to just kind of promote some of the good work that already exists that I just really want to get out there to the world. So my strength training program, I have a pull-up program that's for men and women, progressive program that helps people get pull-ups or get better at pull-ups. I've got my cookbooks I want to sell. So really a lot of it is just more of like trying to put that out into the world. But with that said, this year I'm launching a completely new brand and company that's sort of adjacent to what I already do, health and wellness and celebrating strong women, but it's like kind of a different thing. I can't really talk about it much. It'll be out in like the next probably like few months, but definitely stay tuned because I've got like a whole new fun thing celebrating strength that's going to be coming out in probably, by the spring.
Awesome. Ashleigh VanHouten, this has been an absolute honor and a privilege chatting with you. It's been so much fun. Where can folks go to find out more about you, your coaching, your books? Obviously, it's at the Muscle Maven here on Instagram. Let folks know where they can find you.
Yes, and thank you so much for doing this. This was, again, as somebody who's been in this world for a long time, you're very good at this.
Thank you. That means a ton, Ashleigh. Thank you.
No, you're very good, and you do your research. Absolutely, you'd be surprised how many hosts don't. You're good. You put the work in, so I appreciate you. This was very cool. Yeah, basically talk to me on here. I'm very responsive on Instagram. And then just my website, ashleighvanhouten.com, has all of my books, all of my programs, everything you could ever want to know. And then the podcast is Muscle Science for Women, wherever you listen. And you should definitely check it out. There's something there for everybody. And that's it. Awesome.
Ashleigh, thank you again for fitting me in your schedule. All the best to you and your family. And thank you for chatting.
Thank you so much. Hopefully I'll see you on the island before too long.
Yes, please look me up when you come. Take care, huh?
Bye.
Bye. And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to the good folks at Carnivore Bar and Equip Foods. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. And also, don't forget you can book me for a 30-minute carnivore coaching session through Avero Health. Again, the link will be in the show notes. Until the next time, be well.